recognize this photo? One of the most famous in Soviet history. I mean, of course, at the side you have Stalin and his officials. Stalin looking there but wait, what's that? Did you miss it? Something's changed. Go back. Who's that man? This is the story of Nikolai Yezhov, standing at his tall 4'9", the man who disappeared from Soviet history.
Повторить этот огненный путь. Мы готовы с тобой, старина, повторить этот огненный путь.
Before Nikolai Yezhov became one of the most feared figures in Soviet history, he was a relatively obscure and unremarkable party official. Born in 1895 to a working-class family, Yezhov had little formal education and worked various manual jobs in his youth. Like many young men of his generation, he was drawn to revolutionary politics during the chaos of the First World War and 1917 revolutions. He joined the Bolshevik Party in 1917, not as a leading revolutionary, but as a loyal supporter, willing to follow the orches. During the 1920s, Yezhov steadily rose through the Communist Party ranks, not because of his brilliance or charisma, but because of his absolute loyalty to Stalin. He worked mainly in party administration, particularly in departments responsible for discipline, records, and internal control. This made him useful to Stalin, who valued obedience over independence. By the early 1930s, Yezhov had built a reputation as the ruthless enforcer of party rules, helping to investigate and remove officials accused of disloyalty. His willingness to carry out Stalin's wishes without question set him apart. It was his combination of loyalty, ambition, and lack of moral restraint that eventually brought Yezhov to Stalin's attention and paved the way for his appointment as head of NKVD.
Yezhov assumed power right before the peak of the Great Terror in 1936, and he quickly fabricated the most fearsome period of Soviet repression known in Russian history. During the Great Terror, or Yezhovshchina, the NKVD accused hundreds of thousands of people of political crimes like espionage, wrecking, sabotage, anti-Soviet agitation, and conspiracy. Prisoners were either executed by shooting or sent to Gulag labor camps. Certain minorities, such as Volga Germans or Polish Soviets, were deported and returned to their countries. Significant executions during this time were Zinoviev and Kamenev, who were contestants for power in the 1920s, Yagoda, the ex-head of the NKVD, and Serebryakov were German spies and senior army officers, admirals of the Soviet Navy, and 35,000 Jews of the Russian army. There was also Bukharin and other party leaders who were executed. Overall, the Great Terror caused 700,000 deaths and made Stalin the only source of authority in the entire Europe. There are three main trials in the years 1936, 37, and 38. The trial of the 16 in 1936 tried Zinoviev, Kamenev, and 14 of their supporters for being allegedly involved in the murder of Kirov, who was assassinated in December 1st, 1934. And they were also accused of being Trotskyist. All were shot. The next trial was in 1937, the trial of the 17. 17 of Trotsky's supporters were tried for being Trotskyists, and they were later executed. Meanwhile, Trotsky was settling in Mexico, where he would later be assassinated in 1940. The trial of the 21 in 1938 was the trial of Bukharin and 20 of his supporters who were tried for many crimes, the main one being plotting to overthrow the Soviet government and also working with the German and Japanese secret agencies. All of them were executed.
Having carried out the orders from the party, it would seem that Yezhov would have well-received reactions from the party. However, despite his full obedience to Stalin's wishes, his actions would only feed into Stalin's paranoia. Stalin's scenario would be marked by the fear of being targeted to any usurpers within his sphere, and it just so happens that Yezhov, with whom had managed to liquidate all of Stalin's enemies, now poses threats to Stalin himself. In 1938, Yezhov had a change in the roles as he became the People's Commissar for Water Transport, as eventually Beria would assume his office and previous title, of whom had escaped the purges by late Yezhov. In this period of time, Stalin began undermining the powers of which Yezhov held, increasing the influence of which Beria held in regards to himself. Yezhov himself worried as he grasped the reality of the situation and drove himself into alcoholism in despair and rarely attending his own work. With every aspect of his life falling apart, marital and occupational, Yezhov had lost all influence in the party except for the role he had held on being that of water transport. Then in 1939, Yezhov would be arrested and taken into Sukhanovka prison in an arrest so discreet that even the likes of many NKVD officers were unaware of the capture. He would then be tried in 1940 behind closed doors for being an enemy of the state and amongst other allegations such as being a homosexual. After the trial, Yezhov was in complete shock that he had been sentenced to death and believed that he could appeal to Stalin as he believed that the situation was not inevitable. On February 4th, 1940, Yezhov was executed by a gunshot in the basement of an NKVD station, a small one that was built to Yezhov's own specifications in order to easily conceal what had happened at the station.